hosted us as well in his city of eThekwini. To the leaders and officials representing various sectors who are partners with us in this seminar, ranging from civil, business, community, and farmers who will share with us a number of reflections pertaining to this topic that we will be prosecuting today, to partner organizations, officials supporting members of parliaments in our region, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. Today marks an important day around the reflection on the theme that brought us here in South Africa as a chosen theme of reflection by SADC Parliament. And as we know, the theme for our conversation today will be a reflection on the impact of climate change on women and youth in our SADC region and the role of parliaments in climate change mitigation and adaptation. As Southern African development community, we are recognized as one of the most vulnerable to the adverse impact of climate change globally. This is due to the on rain-fed agriculture and challenges with water scarcity and poverty. The SADC region in particular faces intensifying cycles of drought, floods, and extreme weather events. The Southern African community convenes here today in this assembly under this important theme, because as a region, we are disproportionately affected as the most vulnerable, especially women and young people. So this summit is therefore, this symposium rather, is therefore serving as an important platform for parliamentarians and members of society as partners amongst us to reflect on how legislation, oversight, and policy innovation can safeguard the future of the people of our region. In particular, climate change is not an abstract concept. It is felt daily in the lives of people, in particular amongst women, amongst young people, because women constitute the majority of small farm holders and are primarily responsible for food production and household water and energy collection. We have seen during periods of drought that women must travel longer distances to secure water and firewood, exposing them to heightened risks. Gender inequality coupled with the climate crisis is one of the greatest challenges of our time. It poses threats to way of life, livelihoods, health, safety, and security for women and girls around the world. When disasters strike, women and girls are less able to access relief and assistance, further threatening their livelihoods, well-being, and recovery, and thus creating a future cycle of vulnerability for future disasters. The impact is likewise on young people. The youth demographic in our region is substantial, and the future of young people is profoundly threatened by climate change, as it has the most direct impact on their livelihoods. Many young people in the region aspire for livelihoods in agriculture, yet climate variability makes this sector increasingly unreliable, leading to underemployment and disillusionment. Children and young people are more susceptible to climate change, such as malnutrition and waterborne diseases. The impact is also disproportionate on education in terms of children being unable to attend classes. So therefore, the question of vulnerability is very important, that we can't exclude young people in the decision-making process of climate change. Hence, SADC has particular focus on young people. On regional framework for climate change, indeed, SADC has established a number of interventions to coordinate how we respond in a manner that is well coordinated as a region. As SADC, there's a policy paper on climate change that provides a regional foundation for climate action, recognizing the impacts of human-caused climate change. It summarizes significant climate change risks, which today's coordination and reflection would serve as a deepening platform for that. We also have SADC gender policy that further underscores the need for specific interventions to address gender-based vulnerabilities. I would like to conclude, honorable members, distinguished guests, and esteemed speakers of our region, Honorable Minister, Secretary General of SADC, by indicating today's symposium challenges all of us to look at ways of strengthening legislative and budgetary oversight, and how, as lawmakers in our region, you would assist in monitoring whether national policies do align with regional strategies, such as SADC Climate Change Strategic Action Plan, as well as other global agreements. A number of countries, encouragingly, in our region have already adopted measures that demonstrate the importance of parliamentary oversight. For example, Malawi, Mozambique, and Zimbabwe, amongst others, have introduced mandatory parliamentary reporting following the impacts of Cyclone Idai, enabling legislators to assess the effectiveness of disaster financing and response system. Namibia and South Africa, for example, have also strengthened collaboration between their environment and finance committees to improve oversight on climate finance flows, to make sure that there's effective instruments supporting domestic mitigation and adaptation priorities. This is a profound environmental challenge that we all face, and this symposium brings all of us together to make sure that the call for greater SADC PF indeed serves as a platform to harmonize our efforts to enact gender-sensitive and youth-inclusive legislation in SADC. So that's the context, honorable delegates, esteemed speakers, and distinguished guests, that our reflection today guided along those contextual policy frameworks. Without further ado, I would like to call on the acting president of SADC region, Honorable Isaacs, to take over the program and do the opening remarks.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, SGP. Honorable members, I don't think you will blame me if I sit where I am and make the opening. We are commemorating, I think, a day of remembrance that is very close to our hearts because of the fact that there is no one of us that are not affected by the issue of HIV and AIDS. So we are commemorating World AIDS Day, and I thought what we can do also to show that we are participating with the rest of the world in the commemoration of this specific, very important occasion. So I think we can then stand and observe the remembrance of those that we have seen. May they find eternal peace. Thank you. Thank you very much. If we were not here today, we would be part of some commemoration some way in commemorating those that went before us and also those that are infected and are affected by HIV and AIDS. Program Director, once again, thank you very much. I just want to give due recognition and do the necessary protocol. Honorable Thokozile Didiza, MP Speaker of the National Assembly of the Republic of South Africa and the host speaker of the 58th Plenary Assembly, distinguished speakers of SADC national parliaments and heads of delegations, Ms. Temi Semelani, the MP, Minister of Human Settlements of the Republic of South Africa, members of parliaments from SADC member states, Her Excellency Ms. Guema Sekoma, Secretary General of the SADC Parliamentary Forum, Mr. Clinton Heyman, the Acting DG of Land Reform and Rural Development, Mr. M. Kekana, Marcelo Kekana, the Deputy Director General the Air Quality Management Department of Forestry, Fisheries and the Environment, Mr. Esmo Lee from Toyota South Africa, Dr. Kunene from Human Settlements Directorate, Mr. Zigodi, the President of Abasalibas in Jondo. We know we had a lot of Abasalibas in Jondo. Mr. Zala, Agroecology Directorate, and as well as our esteemed delegates and observers. Ladies and gentlemen, it is indeed an honor for me to address this distinguished gathering at this very important symposium, an engagement that reflects the forum's continued and steadfast commitment to tackling a challenge that has consistently been on the agenda of successive plenary assemblies. Since the 45th Plenary Assembly Session held in Maputo, Mozambique in 2019, the SADC PF has continually elevated and interrogated the far-reaching impacts of climate change. That landmark 45th Plenary Assembly laid the foundation with its theme then, climate change, mitigation and adaptation, the role of parliaments towards implementing the Paris Declaration and the Katowice Roadmap. Close quote. The conversation deepened at the 51st Plenary in Lilongwe, Malawi in 2022, which advanced the discourse by focusing on energy sustainability and self-sufficiency. This momentum continued during the 52nd Plenary, hosted virtually by the Parliament of the DRC in 2022, which emphasized strengthening resilience in nutrition and food security, and at the 53rd Plenary in Arusha, United Republic of Tanzania 2023, which highlighted the modernization of agriculture to confront food insecurity and youth unemployment in a climate-impacted region. The 54th Plenary Assembly in Port Louis, Mauritius, in 2023 reinforced the imperative of coordinated disaster risk reduction and recovery planning, while the 55th Plenary Assembly in Luanda, Angola, in 2024 examined the centrality of renewable energy policies and the creation of a unified regional energy market and amid mounting climate pressures. This sustained and deliberate reflection on climate-related challenges across countries, sectors and themes has demonstrated the forum's deepening commitment to climate governance. It culminated in the landmark resolution of the 57th Plenary Assembly in Victoria Falls, Zimbabwe, to develop the SADC Model Law on Climate Change, an instrument conceived to harmonize national legal frameworks, strengthen adaptive capacity, promote climate-responsive budgeting, embed early warning and mitigation mechanisms, and advance climate-resilient development across all member parliaments. Thus, the theme of this 58th Plenary Assembly builds directly upon this legacy, reaffirming the centrality of parliamentary leadership in advancing climate adaptation, resilience and long-term climate justice across the SADC region through informed, coordinated and robust parliamentary action. At a time when our region is navigating unprecedented change and escalating demands, this symposium gives us the space to pause, reflect and most importantly, chart a purposeful, actionable path forward. I sincerely appreciate your presence and your unwavering commitment to this endeavor, framed under the timely and compelling theme, the impact of climate change on women and youth in the SADC region, and the role of parliaments in climate change mitigation and adaptation. I must acknowledge that we gather today in a city edged by climate trauma. The memories of the Durban Easter floods and the more recent devastation across KwaZulu-Natal and the Eastern Cape are not isolated events. They are chapters in a rapidly escalating regional emergency. Each disaster is a reminder that the climate crisis is neither abstract nor distant. It is unfolding in real time, reshaping lives, livelihoods and landscapes across our region. You may also wish to know that in 2024, the global average temperature rose to 1.55 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels. A stark reminder that the climate emergency is no longer a distant threat, but a lived reality. Current projections indicate that this will be our new normal by 2029. And even more concerning, science tells us that even if every nation were to meet its existing climate pledges fully, the world would still be on course for a catastrophic warming of 2.5 to 3.1 degrees Celsius. But for us in Southern Africa, this crisis is not merely a statistic on a graph. It is a funeral in a village struck by a flash flood. It is a failed harvest on land that once sustained generations. It is a clinic without medicine after a cyclone has swept away roads and bridges. It is human, it is immediate and unbearably costly. And amid this unfolding crisis, a brutal injustice becomes. Climate change is one of the most significant causes of inequality today. It inflicts its worst damage on those who bear the least responsibility, that is women, youth, and rural communities. They are the ones who suffer first, who suffer most, and take the longest to recover. Furthermore, it is common cause that when drought strikes, walk even further in search of water, and the girls who is pulled out of school to help the family cope. When Cyclone Idai and Cyclone Freddy tore through our coast, it was the sexual and the reproductive health of women that suffered most greatly. A reality our forum has rightly and consistently addressed in our deliberations across successive Plenary Assembly sessions. And when crops fail, it is a young person whose dream of a future in agriculture withers to dust. Honorable members, I must also emphasize that our region is by no means, and I'm sorry, is by no means deficient in systems and frameworks designed to guard against the ravages of climate change. We have the frameworks. We have the nationally determined contributions. We have the national adaptation plans, yet we are failing the ultimate test, the test of implementation. The bridge between our global and regional commitments and the lived protection of our people is crumbling, weakened by a massive adaptation finance gap, fragile legislative frameworks, and inadequate integration of climate priorities into our national budgets. This, honorable members, is a chasm we are mandated to fill. This is both our constitutional duty and our moral imperative. Therefore, as we deliberate, let us remain mindful that we are not here as spectators. We are the lawmakers, the custodians of public finance, and the overseers of executive action. Critically, we are the central link that can turn aspiration into law and policy into tangible resilience. I therefore submit that the question this symposium must respond to is not if we should act, but whether we have the courage to wield our unique parliamentary powers with the urgency this crisis demands. We must decide, will we be remembered for empty resolutions or as a parliament that truly inspired a binding regional charter on climate for genuine climate action? Will we keep approving budgets blind to climate risk? Or will we champion climate smart ones that build resilience? Will we watch governments fail in silence? Or will we press for strong commitments or committees that promote accountability? And will we remain passive in the face of suffering? Or will we marshal our diplomacy to unlock the climate survival requires? In the end, the question that transcends all policy is a question of legacy. When the history of this climate crisis is written, what will it say about us? Will it record silence and inaction? Or will it tell the story of leaders in Southern Africa who saw the rising tide and had the courage to build the wall? I submit my answer for posterity. Our role is to build a new architecture of resilience, anchored on robust laws, smart finances, and unflinching regional solidarity. To translate this vision from aspiration to reality, we must master the art of implementation. That means enshrining a just transition for the vulnerable in our legislation. It means guaranteeing that every dollar of climate finance reaches the front lines with absolute transparency. Maybe I should have said but grouping, something else. It means harmonizing our national frameworks with the AU climate strategy so that our regional commitments carry true binding force. This is the bridge between aspiration and action. This is the measure of our leadership. And this is the moment when history will decide whether we were passive witnesses or the generation that rose, united and unafraid, to meet the greatest challenge of our time. As I conclude, I draw the wisdom of the late great son of this country, Archbishop Desmond Tutu, who reminded us, and I quote, 25 years ago, people could be excused for not knowing much or doing much about climate change. Today, we have no excuse, close quote. His words challenge every one of us, government, parliament, private sector, development partners, and communities alike, to rise above complacency and match our knowledge with bold, decisive action. Therefore, let us recommit ourselves to purposeful climate financing, strengthened accountability, and people-centered adaptation and mitigation strategies. Let us choose partnership over isolation. Let us choose foresight over reaction. Let us choose courage over hesitation. And if we act together and act decisively, we will not only protect our environment, we will unlock the promise of a greater, greener, more prosperous SADC region. Let history say, we had the courage to act. With these remarks, it is my honor to declare this symposium open, and I wish all of us fruitful deliberations. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam Acting President. We are now about to start the reflections by partner organizations. Distinguished speakers, you would notice that on the floor of the program, the first three components would reflect the perspective of South African government at the level of the Ministry for Human Settlement, followed by the Department for Land Reform, and thirdly, the Department for Environment and Fisheries. So we would like to take those three inputs and after that have a reflection so that we can consolidate much more reflection on one segment in our 3 spheres setup of our government. And at the level of the city objectively, I would like to make one slight amendment to the speaker that is highlighted there. Members will see that the presenter was Mr. V. Rubane from the disaster unit. Kindly note that Dr. Rob Moodley will take that input on behalf of the city. Without further ado, the 3 inputs as shall be made. They will be made in that order from Minister and Land Reform, as well as disaster. Then thereafter, the acting president of SADC will then preside over the interactions of the input of the three panelists. And we will then take Q&As as guided by the panel coordinator, acting president of SADC. So without further ado, I would like to invite the Honorable Minister to make her reflections on the topic. Either here, Minister, or that side.
Thank Thank you very much, Program Director. I was taking cue from the Acting President, Honorable Sylvia Issa, that I will take my input and comment at SG decisively in direction. Let me also appreciate the Honorable Speaker of our National Assembly in the Republic of South Africa, Honorable Togo Titisa, our distinguished speakers from SADC national parliaments and the heads of delegations. Appreciate our Speaker of KwaZulu-Natal Legislature, Ms. Dr. Boyce, who's our host for the good symposium that we are holding. Honorable members of Parliament from SADC member states, Her Excellency SG of our SADC Parliamentary Forum, representative from our government departments, in particular, the Change and Air Quality Management from the Department of Forest, Fisheries and Environment, Mr. Moodley from Toyota in South Africa, and Mr. Zigote, President of Abahlali Basemjondolo, our Agroecology Department and Directorate, Mr. Lala, and all the esteemed delegates and guests, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. It is my great honor to address this symposium of the 58th session of SADC Parliamentary Forum, gathered under the theme that could not be more urgent, more relevant, timely, and more defining for our collective future. We meet at a time where our region is experiencing climate impact of unprecedented scale. Climate change is no longer a distant environmental concern, but it is a developmental crisis. It is a human settlement crisis. It is an infrastructure crisis. It is also a socio-economic and a governance crisis, and this is across the Southern African development community. It is increasingly becoming a human security crisis. Over the recent years, we have seen the storms that are becoming more violent, droughts that are more severe, floods that are very destructive, and heat waves that are deadly. We are gathered in the city of eThekwini, Durban, as you know it, which has seen communities repeatedly displaced, homes swept away, and the public infrastructure damaged as a result of the devastating effects of climate change. Honorable Speaker, not far from where we are gathered, in the past few days, the people of Umshwati local municipality were inordinately impacted and displaced by severe floods. We bear witness to how climate change is threatening development gains, how it's deepening the historical inequalities, but also undermining the right to adequate housing, which is a constitutional guarantee in South Africa, and an aspiration shared by all countries. As we have seen, the devastating climate events do not follow borders or boundaries. We have experienced here in eThekwini and along our eastern seaboard of South Africa that has also affected multiple countries simultaneously. In the same way that we have all affected no single country, therefore we can't address this challenge or challenges alone or singularly as countries. This gathering therefore comes at a time that is very critical but is also necessary in offering us an opportunity to establish a connected regional, national and local solutions to one of the biggest to our development. Within South Africa, we have adopted the Climate Change Risk and Vulnerability Plan, which has also created the Vulnerability Assessment, we call it RVA in short, and it confirms that most affected groups by climate disaster are rural communities who are already facing poverty and limited access to services. They are in peri-urban areas as well, and this results in informal settlement dwellers located in floodplains, in steep slopes, in wetlands, and in fire-prone areas. Women, youth, and children, as acting president has shown, bear the brunt of inadequate livelihoods, exposure, and further socio-economic stress. Climate change is not gender neutral. It magnifies the structural inequalities that women and girls already face. Women are disproportionately exposed, disproportionately impacted, and disproportionately responsible for absorbing the climate shocks. In our communities, women carry the further burden of concern and caring for the sick when disaster strikes. It is women who also rebuild the household with fewer resources and less formal support. And yet women, despite being at the front lines of climate impact, remain at the margins of climate decision making. And I think we must all agree that this status quo must change. Equally, Program Director did indicate the negative impact that young people growing up in a world shaped by climate uncertainty face. They inherit the consequences of decisions they did not make. But we also know that in our youth, we have the greatest asset of Africa and the greatest demographic asset. They are the most powerful drivers of innovation, resilience, and adaptation. Their creativity, energy, and digital influence make them essential partners in climate resilient communities. Honorable members, what does this mean for the critical role parliaments must play in shaping a climate resilient and a just transition for Southern Africa? It means that people most impacted by climate change must be able to be at the center and be allowed to be at the center of decision making that we as lawmakers drive. As we confront the escalating climate crisis, we're also called upon to realize the vision articulated in the African Union Agenda of 2063. The Africa we want, which was further defined. It must be prosperous, peaceful, united, a resilient continent built on an inclusive growth, sustainable development, and the empowerment of women and youth. The interlinked climate risks affecting our human settlements and our infrastructure broadly follow a chain of events. When the infrastructure fails, ecosystems collapse. When livelihoods decline, informal settlements expand. When governance is weak, communities are unable to adapt. And when the finance does not reach those who need it most, poverty and climate impacts reinforces one another. That is why climate change is not simply an environmental challenge. It is a systemic challenge, one that requires systemic solutions. In response to this, our climate change response strategy and implementation plan for human settlements guides us on how we need to build resilience between now and 2030. And I often say to my colleagues, we must no longer say 2030, we must just say in 4 years' time. Allow me to share the 3 pillars which we have adopted for a relevant and an entire SADC region, pillars for human settlement, as we have partly met in Kenya under UN Habitat to develop our human settlement strategy. Settle people, that is pillar 1, in places and preserve the ecosystems that protect them. This will avoid communities being placed in flood-prone land, unstable slope wetlands, and coastal zones that are prone to storm surges and heat-stressed areas. And this is the first and the fundamental line of defense against climate hazard. It forces us to do our spatial planning correctly with the poor and the vulnerable in mind. Pillar 2 addresses the vulnerable settlement already that are in unsafe places. The reality is that we're not coming from a zero baseline. People are already living in hazardous locations. For these communities, we must, one, upgrade the informal settlement in Sutu where it's safe, and improve essential services such as water, sanitation, and electricity. We must also invest in the nature-based solutions on wetlands, urban greening, and vegetated buffers to protect the people who are already residing in these areas. As South Africa, we affirm that no community should remain invisible to policy simply because they are poor. And the last pillar, which is to establish a climate resilient infrastructure, norms, standards, and settlement typologies. Our infrastructure must withstand climate realities, and these shifts will reduce future losses, enhance livability, and create safer communities. We must all invest in innovative building technologies as human settlement infrastructure for the future must be reliable and resilient. This is a community-driven process. It must not exclude others. We must build a region where communities do not only receive climate information, but are allowed to shape it, where they do not only participate in planning, but they lead. And they do not only face climate risk, but also define and find solutions together. So disasters move across borders, so information must do that so. A regional integration approach allows real-time data sharing, predictive modeling across the entire climate zones. This saves lives and can reduce damage. We need to play a central role in building the climate resilient SADC. In conclusion, Program Director, we need to ensure, as we respond to the question of how will we build a region that awaits for disaster to strike, or a region that acts before disaster becomes inevitable. The future we want, which I do believe is within our reach, is a future where cities and towns are resilient, safe, and inclusive, where ecosystems are protected and provide life-saving solutions, where women and youth lead resilient initiatives. Infrastructure is strong, smart, and climate-ready. How do we ensure we do that? Firstly, we can ensure that the land planning use legislation integrates climate risks. Secondly, we set the norms and standard for infrastructure. Thirdly, we align human settlements and any other infrastructure laws with climate changes bill on our regional frameworks to allow us to exercise oversight. The fourth point will be to ensure that expenditure on housing infrastructure, disaster risk management aligns with climate change. And lastly, we require early warning systems and municipal preparedness. At the outcome of this symposium, let us all embrace this moment not as a threat, but as an opportunity to reshape our communities. To reshape our communities which will allow them to live in dignity and not in danger. Parliament can be a champion for a just transition for all. Let me wish you well in the deliberations further of this symposium and wish you well in your endeavors in building communities that are climate resilient and secure a future that our people deserve in their communities. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Honourable Minister. Another round of applause. We also have panelists sitting on the table who would also complement that reflection by painting out the picture of what actually happens and what we can do better to build resilience of our climate challenges. So the topic on the use of drone data and geospatial systems in building a more resilient community will be delivered by Mr. Heyman. Mr. Heyman is the Acting Director General for the Department of Land Reform and Rural Development. He will be making a presentation, and after him, it will be Mr. Kekan from the Department of Forestry also making a presentation. Please proceed. You will be making a presentation for him. Thank you, Mr. Heyman.
Thank you very much, and thank you for giving me the floor, Honourable Program Director. I'm looking at the long list of salutations, and I think Acting President of the SADC Parliamentary Forum and Member of Parliament of the Republic of South Africa, all protocol observed. I hope that's fine. All right. To start with, I think we need to look at building climate resilience in the SADC region. Some of the climate change impacts in SADC that we've been observing over the past few years have increased significantly. And if you just look at this message on the screen, you'll see that this is actually the projection, an overlay of a map of the SADC region, where the red areas are areas that are prone to severe climate risks in the future.
You are controlling the presentation. The presenter is running the slides. Please don't simultaneously run as well. Just a request. Please, the presenter will run the slides. Thanks. Can we make sure the screens are simultaneously changing?
Yeah.
So just check alignment on the main screen and the small screens in front. So the small ones are running, the big ones are not moving. Just align. Will it be fine whilst we are adjusting the presentation on environment, then proceeds? Mr. Kekan will take us through that small glitch. Our apologies. Once it's sorted, we'll go back to Mr. Heyman. Over to you, Mr. Kekan.
Thank you, Program Director. Let me start on protocol. To the salutations, Honorable Sylvia Isaacs, Acting President for SADC Parliamentary Forum, Honorable Angela Chakoti-Jiza, MP and Speaker of National Assembly of the Republic of South Africa and host Speaker for the 58th Plenary Assembly, distinguished speakers of SADC national parliaments and heads of delegations, Honorable Thembi Simelane, MP, Minister of Human Settlements of the Republic of South Africa, Honorable members of Parliament from SADC member states, Her Excellency Ms. Boemas, former Secretary General of SADC Parliamentary Forum, Mr. Mudli, Senior Vice President, Corporate Service Toyota, South Africa, Dr. Okune, Human Settlement Directorate, Mr. Skode, President of Abatlali Basem John Denny, Mr. El Gladla, Agroecology Directorate, yourself, Mr. George, esteemed delegates and observers, ladies and gentlemen, all protocol observed. It is my singular honor and profound gratitude to deliver this presentation on behalf of Minister Veli Okam, Minister of Forestry, Fisheries and the Environment of the Republic of South Africa. You'll also pardon me for my voice. I'm carrying a cold from the Amazonia, Brazil, where we assist with the similar matters. I'll now move into the presentation. The DFFE presentation that was on the screen. I'll move it with this. Thank you so much. Apologies, technology glitches happens all the time. Okay, if you can move it for me. The front, yeah. Okay, so this is the outline for the presentation, a short context, and we'll speak a little bit about the impacts of climate change in the SADC region, the parliamentary obligations, and short recommendations from Minister Veli Okam. Right. So this is what Minister Simelane was talking about. If you look at the two lines on the graph there, you can clearly see that by the year 2023, we started to breach the safer temperature goal of maintaining global average temperature increases to below 1.5 degrees. In actual fact, these global goals on temperature come from what we call the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, is the scientific authority on climate change that compared the two temperature goals, the one with 2 degrees and the one with 1.5 degrees. With 1.5 being the safer global average temperature goal. And you can see on the slide there that starting from 2023, we started to breach that particular temperature goal, with 2024 being the full calendar year where we completely went over 1.5 degrees, meaning we are more at risk now than before. However, this is the point about SADC. The SADC region is warming at twice the global average. So if it says we've breached the temperatures to below 1.5, it means in some regions within SADC we're already at 3 degrees. And this has its own consequences. So as SADC, we need to be concerned, and this is recognized globally, that the region is warming at twice the global average warming rates. And This slide just shows some of the impacts. In 2023-24, the World Food Program actually indicated that 27 million people are in need of food aid within SADC, and appeal for donation of $5.5 billion to assist with life-saving programs within SADC. This emanates from a whole lot of droughts that ravaged the region, and we also saw in the same year that Lake Kariba dipped below 5%, and the Val Dam for the first time went below 40% in that particular year. And we have also seen, as Acting President Isaac said, the increased frequency and severity of some of these weather events, and she spoke about the cyclone that we saw in our region, the floods in this particular province, and so forth. However, what is more disturbing is that scientists are predicting that we are close to having the first 5 tropical cyclone, and this will most likely land in Madagascar, Mozambique, and Malawi. And this is going to, if you just compare with what we already had, if we are to have this 5 category cyclone, we are going to have more disaster in the making. But we've also seen how the rapid change between El Nino and La Nina has affected SADC, including agriculture in particular. That also comes with the intense heat waves that are also a particular problem. And there is a threat to food and water security, particularly around the agriculture, which is mainly rain-fed. But as I indicated, the whole issue of energy security, particularly where you are having high power, it's also under threat. We've seen this in the Zambezi and Limpopo affecting hydropower production. Minister Simelane also spoke about climate-induced human settlements due to floods and drought. But SADC itself has projected economic losses of between 2 to 5% of annual GDP losses due to climate disaster. This is one of the pictorials from the visit of President Ramaphosa to this province, where 544 human lives were lost, and 7,000 houses destroyed, and 40,000 people displaced, and the damages which accounted to about 3.6 billion. And at that particular point, Mr. President also indicated that this is due to climate change. The impacts were exacerbated by climate change. And in fact, 3 years later, Wits University did a formal attribution study and confirmed what the president had said at that time, that in fact the disaster that we saw here was magnified by climate change. Now, just coming to some of the roles that the Parliament play. Of course, my slides indicated the scientific challenge or scientific part, but also climate change is a governance and policy issue, hence we are all gathered here. Climate change is a multi-dimensional development challenge, and as the slide showed, is starting to reverse even the little gains that we've made in our region. And it intersects with poverty reduction, economic transformation, governance and regional integration. However, Parliament holds special powers which are central to climate action. These include legislation, budget oversight and approvals, and representation and constituency engagement, also parliamentary diplomacy and regional leadership. Now let's go into these 4 areas a little bit more. What Minister Occam was projecting is that Parliament should enact or update national climate change laws that align with international commitments, such as the Paris Agreement, the one that gave us these projections of 1.5 degrees, and other international climate change frameworks. And I think Minister Simelane spoke about the disaster risk management and the SADC framework, and also look into these issues of mitigating climate change and adapting to it. But also promote climate-related laws supporting things that would help us in the long run, such as renewable energies and climate-smart agriculture and other areas of climate action. Parliament must use its oversight role to ensure that legislation and strategies are being timelessly implemented and enforced. Just to give an example of how Parliament is acting on this in South Africa, if we look at the issue of mitigating against climate change, so as a department, we have what we call the mitigation system with various components, and on the left, you see this is the goal that we present before Parliament, which is greenhouse gas emission trajectory range in a particular plan. And we also have a monitoring and evaluation system below that. But to implement this mitigation goal, we have what we call sectoral targets that we allocate to various sectors of the economy, but also to the industry. We allocate certain allowances with what we call carbon budget. Now the industry has to respond, if you go to the right, through mitigation plans that demonstrate how company is involved or achieving its plan that it would have submitted. And the sectors, they formulate several policies and measures, such as the Renewable Independent Power Purchase Program, and many other energy programs, such as the integrated resource plans and so forth. So this would be a mitigation system in South Africa, and Parliament, through its committee and committees, have an oversight on this in terms of implementation. That is in terms of reducing greenhouse gas emission, but as other speakers have said, we also need to adapt to the impacts, because climate change is here now, so we really need to adapt to this. So we would have something called an adaptation planning system with the National Climate Change Adaptation Strategy, which of course was adopted as way back as 2020. But all our provinces also have their own adaptation strategy, and all the 44 district municipalities have developed their strategies and so forth. So this is now, the oversight happens through what we call a cluster system, because it cut across the central government. So Parliament would oversee the implementation of these particular adaptation measures. But also, the second point that I spoke about is budget approval. The recommendation is that we should ensure that national budgets reflect climate priorities, especially on adaptation financing for vulnerable communities that are highly impacted by climate change. Also monitor the use of climate finances, including from international and domestic mechanisms and so forth. Parliamentarians can also demand transparency and accountability from climate-related ministries and agencies, and you need credible information for this. There should also be a link on international financing requests to ambitious national climate targets through each and every country that is part and parcel of the Paris Accord, produce what we call nationally determined contribution, which comprise of the mitigation targets and adaptation targets. So the financing should be aligned to this for the implementation that is necessary. Now, the third area that we indicated on the next slide is a big one, which is representation and constituency engagement. And this is where you talk about parliaments of vulnerable and marginalized communities, including women, youth, small holder farmers, and pastoralists. It should ensure vulnerable groups are part and parcel of climate decision making, especially when enacting the laws, by taking these laws to the people for their inputs. This is where Parliament play a big role. Also, something that is lacking, which is awareness on adaptation practices and disaster preparedness and just transition opportunities. So awareness is an ongoing effort where Parliament can also play a role. Just to talk a little bit about the issue of protecting and being the voice of the vulnerable and the marginalized communities, and this is the point that Minister Simelane made, that climate change disproportionately affects women because climate impacts are driven by high dependency on climate-sensitive livelihoods and low adaptive capacity, including poverty and existing inequalities in the SADC. And we'll come to that point. So what are these existing gender inequalities and social norms that are specific to women and girls in particular? This has to do more with the lack of adaptive capacity in these particular groupings. Hence, Parliament can play a big role being a voice there. Another point is about food insecurity and agriculture, where we spoke about pastoralists and small farm holders. This is also important, and this is where women make up a large portion of agriculture workforce within the SADC. So with the erratic rainfalls, obviously that particular groupings are affected by reduced crop yields, directly threatening their livelihoods and household food security. The last point that we made of the four is about parliamentary diplomacy and regional leadership. There's an opportunity here to use regional blocs and networks, such as the SADC Parliamentary Forum, the Africa Parliamentary Network on Climate Change, the Pan-African Parliament, and the Inter-Parliamentary Union to amplify the African voices in global climate issues. The IPU, Inter-Parliamentary Union, is a very important forum where we've seen increasingly members from developing countries projecting really the voices from the global south and demanding climate justice from the global north. We could also champion equity, climate finance delivery and technology transfer for the region, because without this, we will not be able to deliver the climate smart agricultures that we're talking about, build energy security that we've mentioned previously. And the last point that the minister wanted to highlight here is that it could be important to promote and harmonize climate policies across the SADC region, especially for shared and transboundary resources. And I made an example of the hydropower between Zambia and Zimbabwe. And so you could harmonize such kind of policies for collaboration within the region itself. The final recommendation from Minister Oakam is around the issue of SADC Parliamentary Climate Caucus to coordinate this regional climate oversight, climate capacity building, which is quite important for members of parliament through partnerships. There are various organizations in Africa that assist with capacity building for parliamentarians, such as the African Union Commission itself, and somebody spoke about the strategy on climate change, but also the Africa Group of Negotiators Expert Support, and you've seen ACNES. You've seen this in many of your countries, providing support to parliamentarians. But there's another structure that we do have from the UN in Africa, in Uganda. It's called United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change Regional Collaboration Center. It also works with the above organizations that I pointed out to do capacity building for parliamentarians. But there's nothing that beats peer-to-peer learning. And this is something that is important that you can all collaborate on. I think that's all from Minister Oakam, in short, Program Director, and I will stop here and not add or subtract anything. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Pekan. I hope our IT is cooperative now for Mr. Heyman to ascend to the stage. May I also make an announcement, distinguished delegates, that should you need to pick up coffee or tea outside, you could do so quietly by exiting and going to your right to pick up tea quietly, and you could come back. So in the interest of time, we are compacting that time without allowing a break. It is available should you pick it up, should you need rather, then pick it up quietly. Without further ado, Mr. Heyman, please take the stage.
Thank you, Program Director. I'll try again, honorable members. Here we go. So we started with the climate change impacts in SADC. It is a difficult button to push, but so the first thing that we see here is climate shocks are intensifying across SADC, and the impacts fall hardest on women and young in high-risk areas. Rising temperatures and extreme weather events affect the continent, but SADC to a large degree. Okay, now the hands are up. You want me to move your, you're going to take me through. Okay, I'll just say next. Please go back to my first slide. I'm not moving today. Here we go. First slide, please. Thank you. All right, next slide. So we've got a whole lot of things that happen when this climate change happens. We get damage to our infrastructure, our services. We get a lot of uneven spatial exposure to climate risk. And this means that we've got high-risk zones where there are informal settlements, communal lands and river basins that often lack infrastructure to protect it. And I would suppose that the right thing to do would to design, and I think the Honourable Minister of Human Settlements indicated correctly that you need to be able to provide services in situ. So you need to be able to go into those settlements and improve the way that things work. There's also this disproportionate burden on women and youth, especially in these informal economies that face higher adaptation costs due to livelihood and the various care burdens that they carry, as well as insecure land rights. And I think insecure land rights is something that we really have to look at. If we can secure the land right, we can also start securing a whole lot of the other burdens that the women and youth have to carry. Next slide, please. So when we look at, there's various events that have happened. In Malawi, we had Cyclone Freddy in 2023. You can go to the next slide. In Mozambique, we had various cyclones, as well as in Zimbabwe. And here we had a lot of submerged agricultural belts in Mozambique that were affected. In Zimbabwe's case, there was a lot of degradation and youth migration because of the multi-seasonal drought that took place from 2022 to 2024, and it declined in terms of the NDVI declines by nearly 30 to 60%, which decimated the communal grazing zones and pushed youth towards seasonal migration, crop losses, food insecurity, especially affecting the women farmers. We can go to the next slide, please. In Zambia and Namibia, we had water heat changes. These climate stresses are increasing the time and labor burden on women while undermining the opportunities that they have. So you'll see there was flooding in Zambia, we had water scarcity and labor burden was also a major contributor. There was youth migration and displacement, and then extreme heat in the north of Namibia. Can we go to the next slide? In South Africa, the KZN floods are very prolific, but also we've had tornadoes in the same area over the past. And one of the things that we start seeing is that infrastructure failures worsen the impacts. There's a better need for gender-responsive land use regulation in terms of the adoption of planning, and it must include stronger zoning, disaster risk assessments and protection for tenure insecure households. And then also the major cost effect is the cost of repairing these settlements. Next slide, please. So what are the questions that policymakers are asking of us as the officials on the ground? You've got questions that you have in your parliaments that need to be answered, and I thought I'd put a few up. Maybe go to the next slide, please. So typical questions that policymakers have is they say, where are the geographic hotspots where women and youth face the greatest climate-related exposure? Drought, flooding, heat, crop losses, and how do these patterns differ across the rural, peri-urban and the informal areas? These are questions that technocrats aren't necessarily asking, but you're asking those in your parliament. You're saying, where are these people? And you can get this information from satellites. Yes, you can. The one thing that you need to do better is you need to know where the people actually are. You need to be able to geolocate these populations. Because in some areas in SADC, they also migrate because of climate change is one thing, but in some areas, even war shifts people. They follow natural resources like wood, timber. They follow these resources because they rely on the resources for their livelihoods. So that's a typical question. How is climate-induced migration reshaping population movement? How to share the data we have at a national level and at a SADC level and at a continental level in order for us to make better analysis and predictions of the future. Next slide, please. So decision support systems help us build back better climate resilience. Next slide, please. In a geospatial value chain, everybody's going to say geospatial. So that's the other hat that I wear. I'm also the co-chair, or South Africa is the co-chair with the USA and Saudi Arabia for the United Nations Expert Group on Geospatial Information Management. And South Africa has just stepped down and handed over the chairpersonship of the Africa region. Mozambique is the first vice chair to that grouping as well. So we're well represented on the continent from a SADC perspective. And geospatial becomes important where we start talking about how do we acquire data, how do we process data, how do we integrate the analytics of the data, and how do we solve these questions that parliamentarians have. Next slide, please.
Wait for NAB. System ready. Arming.
So So what we've done in South Africa is we've put a lot of time and effort into building a drone program. The drone program then looks at collecting close to real-time information, but at a very fine scale. So satellite imagery gives you 1.5 meter accuracy. You can, for instance, take your Google Maps on your phone now and look at this building, and you can zoom in. But there's a point where it becomes unclear. You can't see what's really happening. If you look on the drone imagery, if we do it right and we set up all the correct GPS stations, we can get up to 3 centimeters clarity. That means we can see the washing hanging on the line. We can see the bolts that have rusted on a bridge. That's the kind of imagery. So we built this national drone program for the country. It's currently live in the Department of Land Reform and Rural Development. You can go to the next slide. We have a national footprint, and we cover all the provinces. We've got 50 pilots at the moment, and the purple are the women in our team. We're still not there, but we're pushing to up the numbers of the female pilots. And then obviously the others just showed the types of drones we have in every province. But what's important is we fly on request of our own work in land reform and rural development, but we also do work for the Department of Human Settlements, the Housing Development Agency. We also have flown for KZN. We do work for GCIS, etc., etc. So it's an all-of-government program that allows us to collect very high resolution imagery. Next slide, please. There's just the team of pilots at the bottom, and just some of the work that we do and the 2 types of drones we currently have. We've got a fixed-wing drone that we can clip in different cameras with, and then we have the smaller DJI Mavic 3 drones that we can put into an informal settlement, and I'll show some of the pictures as we move along. Next slide, please. Just the processing of geospatial data, specifically when we're looking at a flight, there's the proprietary of drones that you'll see on the left-hand side, and to your right-hand side, you'll see the geospatial tools that you need. We have brought into the Esri suite of tools, and I think most people do, just because of its replicability within the industry, but you can also run that imagery in open source tools like, there's a number of them. So let's go there. First part, you must fly. Next part, you must make sure your flight is very accurate on the ground. You've got to make sure that you can tie that flight data back to a point on the ground. So if you see a flower in the landscape, that flower you must try and tie back to 100% accurate. And we're able with these drones to get to 3% accurate. A surveying diagram usually in South Africa is anything under 5 centimeters accurate. So you can, and I'll go on and show you that. The next thing is, and this is where it becomes tricky, you now move away from a pilot, which is the easy part, and then you go into this data processing side. Manipulating the data in terms of getting it, the GPS coordinates correctly, overlaying it over your existing maps, and then processing that data with various products so that you can do geo-AI, and I'll show you how it works now. Next slide, please. This is a dashboard we created. It was called PESI, the Presidential Employment Stimulus Initiative. What this program shows is, or this dashboard, is this is how we can represent your information. So each one of those dots on the map, there's 108,000 of them, is a person and a household. And if you go and click, you can go maybe to the next slide. If you click on the slide, you are on a dot anywhere of those 108,000. You get all the information of the person who visited them on a specific day. You get the ID number, what they're farming with, woman-headed household, their social security numbers, all that information is available. And then we use that and we put that information, we capture it with a product, a data collection product. It's called Survey 123 or Field Maps. And once you've captured it on the site and you've taken the photos that you want, it creates a PDF document with signatures and everything in, so you now have a record of that person. That previous map is 108,000 subsistence producers in the country that we gave vouchers to. And the interesting part at the time is we only focused on women and youth under 35. We excluded men, and I think I wasn't very popular for excluding men. But we survived, and we were able to give out, just after COVID, a significant number of vouchers to all of these people and visit them. So next slide, please. This is Ladysmith in KZN, recent flooding that took place there. And what we can do with this information now, I have a data set for a subsistence producer. Next slide, please. If you look at this map, the little dots that you see on it, the red with the yellow and the surrounding, those are all the PESI farmers. So I've taken that data set that I collected 2 years ago, and I've put it over last month's KZN flood data. Now I'm able to flood this image. Go to the next slide, please. So there we go. You can let it play. I think you stopped it. It was moving. It was a video. Just play the video. No, go back. Just go back. Click again. Okay. It's not running. All right. So what happens is the simulation. There we go. The bottom of the sheet, right? The simulation we do is, there we go. So we're able to simulate if the dam wall broke, what would happen to the town, which it didn't break, but we're able to simulate, and then you'll see, we can actually see where the affected communities are. So you'll see there's in the center of the image, there's a red dot with a yellow circle. That was a PESI farmer. So now we know, we can go and click on that dot and we can find out who was that farmer. So this is what's nice now when we build back resilience. We're able to plan and predict what happens if the dam wall breaks. What happens if we were to get 200 millimeters of rain on this area, who will be affected? So we can then go to the next slide, please. So there we've got all the subsistence farmers. The ones with the red dot and the yellow circle on the outside are those that are affected. Then slightly affected are the other ones, the ones with the green dot inside, and the ones that are green are unaffected by that simulated flood. I don't want to create any that just actually happened. Next slide, please. We can then take the information that we had from the farmer data that you saw up front with that dashboard, and we can actually go and see who exactly those farmers were, what they were farming with, at what scale, and that's a way that we can start building back resilience and helping them specifically because we have a record of those subsistence producers. Next slide, please. That's the ones then that were just directly impacted by the flood, and you can see the spread of ages. The next one. Then the commodities that were impacted, so we can see that that flood impacted the following commodities. And we can go to the next slide. These are just illustrative. The indirectly impacted, next slide. and the low impacted people. So we can see by age, we can see by commodity what happened because of that flood that we simulated and who was affected. So you can start building in mechanisms to help those people when such events occur. Next slide, please. This is an interesting one. You can just, I think it should run. So no, go back. You're too fast. Click, there we go. Push play, please. It'll run. Just let it go. So what you do here is we can simulate off an image that we've flown with a drone. We can give you the various, the DSM, the DTM, and the RGB. The RGB is an image of the area. We put over the contours that you can see there, the various heights. And this happens it's a 30-minute flight, and we put the contours on, and it probably takes us 2 days to do that with all this information. And then we can show you what happens if certain amounts of rain fall in this village at this time, and where will it flood, and where will the water pool together. And this is the capability. If you go to the next slide, so then you'll see the actual imagery. So this one will now play, and we've now run an example, and I specifically left the frame in. And the frame is important because you see we can set how porous the ground is. Is it a sandy ground, or is it a tarred, or is it cement? So then we can put an example here. We say it's 200 millimeters of rain over a certain amount of time, and then you will see where the water starts to pool. And this is where the modeling becomes really important. So we know, as I'm an urban planner by profession, that you do not want to go and build houses where that water is damming up like that. That's where you should clear it out. Now, clearing out where people stay is another problem. Or you have to build in mitigation measures upstream to divert that water away from those areas. Next slide, please. Here's just some Joe AI. I think that's the next big thing. It's getting better and better. This is Zwelathemba Township, and we flew the imagery on the left-hand side is what we flew, and then we put AI. You've got various packages, and you put it in and you say, please count all the structures, and it'll count everyone. And it's very, very accurate at the moment. We like maybe 1,000 out or so at a time, but it's getting better and better. And where something would take you, if I had to count on the left-hand side, it would take me probably a day to go and accurately count. And this other side is running in 5 minutes. And that's the kind of reaction time that we're getting now. Next slide, please. Also, just something on resolution. Everybody says the better your resolution, the better decisions you're going to make. Not true. If you look at this diagram, you'll see at 50 centimeter resolution, we want to look at structures. You'll see we only picked up 1 or 2 structures on the 50 centimeter. There's a little red line around it. This thing's not working, so I can't actually show you. On the left, top left, then you go to 25 centimeters and you see a whole lot of, all the structures are nicely identified. If you, now go back. If you go to 15 centimeters, it's probably your ideal image quality, because the AI starts picking up the right number of structures. However, if you go to the 15 centimeter resolution, bottom there, okay, there we go. It's even starting to pick up the graves. So now you're getting that miss, the miss at somebody's house that is passed, but it's you're now missing the point of the exercise. So we've learned a lot of lessons, and at about 15 centimeters, we're getting the best results using our AI. The other thing that we found is shadows. A long shadow, if you don't fly at the right time of the day, you see the toilet over there in the bottom picture, and the shadow of the house are counted as a structure. Just because it's not at the right time of the day. So you want to fly mainly when the sun's up high so that you get no shadows. So shadows are counted sometimes. So you have to make, but it's getting better. Next slide, please. And you'll notice this imagery, you can see the tires on the roof, and that's what we're talking about with the drone imagery, which we add to the other imagery sets that we, satellite, etc. That's fine, you can go to the next slide. This is just to show you how clear the imagery is in Grabo, what we've been doing there, and the work that we've been doing. What's nice is we can work in various areas of the country simultaneously because we have pilots covering the entire country. Yeah. I want to move along, please. Thank you. Next one. So you can use it for safety, security, disaster. You can look at counting human settlements, etc. And you can play this video. This is the HDA. I think it's one of the Geberga project that we had. We looked at Motherwell here specifically, but in this case we flew in one day. We did 22 settlements, and we did it for human settlements because we weren't sure of the number of houses that were actually affected by the floods. So we zoomed in, and there you'll see there's Motherwell, that little area next to the graveyard. And then we did certain analysis on Motherwell. You can go to the next slide. Next slide. Yeah, there we go. So that's the informal settlement of Nonkanjani. And we then able to say, if the slope looks like this, and we flew over, and we were able to get visual imagery. And in the settlement, let's say for instance, they said there was 500 houses that were affected by water damage. We flew over and we picked up 30. So immediately you can see the difference. It saves the state money immediately, but it also gives the right kind of disaster response. Next slide, please. So we will zoom in, and you'll see where the water is lying here. We can't always get in with the drones. We've bought better ones now that can fly in stronger weather conditions, but you can see where the water, the dark patches of water are lying. Now we put over the DSM and the DTM over this, and then you start seeing the real value of the data. Next slide, please. So we can look at the various, in this village specifically, and I used this, we can see where the next level of disaster is going to happen. So here you've got building footprints and where the structures are located. The estimated number of households here are 3,986. And the number of households provided by the municipality were 3,500. So you can see we counted about 400 more. Next slide, please. Based on time and the slope, these are the areas that we can now identify that will be first affected by a flood, because they're the lowest lying in that settlement. So you can see that there's households that would be affected at time one. At the first instance is 858. Not affected would be 3,128. Next slide, please. If the flood gets worse, then you see that we now have 1,469 that are affected. And the next slide. And this is all based on elevation, the way the water's flowing. And at the third instance, we will then get 2,950 affected. The importance of this data is we can now plan, say, how can we keep the water from flooding these areas within that settlement in a way. It could be by putting in stormwater drainage after, etc. Next slide, please. So what you have here is you've got your building footprint in blue. It's called Secure Watch. And Secure Watch is something that you purchase a package and it watches this informal settlement. The next slide. And then this is what we can see from the drone imagery with Secure Watch over it. And you can see where all the houses are now gone after the flood. All those little pink blocks are where the houses have now been destroyed by the flood water. So it's very good at measuring the difference. One is from satellite, and the other one is from drone imagery. But they work together in tandem to be able to give you a very good understanding of your area. The next slide, please. Next one. This is just Victoria West. You can play the video. It's a whole town. It's in the center of South Africa. What makes it useful is that we can now, for the first time, build a digital twin of the town. We fly the town, one day, 42,000 photos with 2 drones and 2 pilots, and we're able to generate this information, and we're able to overlay your spatial framework, your land use scheme over it. We're able to lay all your deeds information over, and it's because it is so accurate. It all falls within the cadastral data of the town. All right. This will run for a little while, so we may want to skip over. Next slide, please. What we also can do is, in the town, you've got your land use scheme, but this is the imagery that we're able to generate from one flight. That flight over that church probably went over it for 20 seconds, the aeroplane. And this is the kind of imagery that we're able to rebuild back from that. So this is not an imagery, they call it a point cloud, and it really is of the highest quality data that you can find. We've now gone further with this work, and we've done the internal building. We've taken handheld scanners, and you walk inside the building, so you now can go into the building also. So we're busy with that, as well as street views like the Google cars that drive around. So we can then really get very good information from this. All right, we can move to the next one, once it's made. This is Jagersfontein. It's again in the news for poor management in terms of that disaster site. What you're seeing on the left in September 2022, that whole dam, the tailings dam broke, and I think in many SADC countries you've got big mines that pump up all of this material and they store it. The tailings dam broke. If you go to the next slide, and what happened is that if you look at the spatial plan from a town planning point of view, you'll see this is what it looks like. The tailings dam is that little orange block in the middle, but the arrow where the red is, the red arrow that you see there, that is a proposed new township layout that they've put in there. Now let's go to the next slide. And you'll see what happens. This is the flood risk area that they predicted would be if that tailings dam broke. Let's see the next slide. Again, the next slide. This is fine. Next one. All of my land use stuff. So in 2009, that's what the settlement looked like. In 2021, that was the tailings dam, how big it got. And then in 2022, it broke. And look at all the sludge that came out of that. But critically is look at the settlement at the bottom side of the picture. That is where they proposed a new settlement to be put. So we've now been able to tell that municipality, you can't build there, find somewhere else for new houses. You can't expand into the route of that tailings dam. Next slide. And what was interesting about this disaster, it was significant. It moved 25 kilometers downstream. Okay, that's just another point. And next, where it broke. Next slide. And then, this is of what happened. And that's almost, what we did is we just modeled it now to see exactly how that sludge affected the dam. And what's useful about this is we can start doing this for all tailings dams in the country. We fly them, they have got sensors on now, but we can predict where you shouldn't be putting houses in the route for in case this thing does break. Next slide. I'm nearly done. Okay, so those are just the ones affected. The next slide. I think this is a video of the helicopter, what it actually it's a video just of what the effect of that tailings dam sludge disaster was. So you can see it was very deep. There's our vehicles trying to get out and the affected houses. You can move to the next slide. I think that's fine. We can get the picture. So within 24 hours, that sludge had moved into the river system and moved downstream and polluting everything on its way. And this is why we need to try and prevent these things. The important part of the drones is if we work in partnership with the mines, we can actually monitor movement. It's a type of shale that they use that disintegrates over time. Next slide. This is just images that we've now done post of what it looks like, that hole where the sludge came out. Next slide. And the important part of this is everything you see here is done in-house by government. Nothing is done by anybody else. Everything, the pilots, the drones, everything, the processing is done in-house. Next slide. And that's the end of the presentation. Even I'm surprised it went long. If anybody wants more information, if you scan that QR code, it'll take you to the Land Reform and Rural Development Drone Program site, and there you can get a whole lot of information, including contact details on how you can get hold of us. If you're government, if you're another government, we happily share information, we happily share data sets, we share expertise. We've had a number of our colleagues here from Namibia, we've had groups from Swaziland visiting us, not specifically for drones, but for spatial planning purposes. And the ultimate intent, I suppose, would be that we build a facility for the state where we can do things quicker. And when we look at the country, we've now recently been, between ourselves and the Department of Planning, Monitoring and Evaluation, we're setting up the IMC for spatial governance. And this IMC will be a first, I think, of its kind, in that for the first time we'll have ministries and ministers that can sit and say, Minister of Human Settlements, this is my data. National Treasury, this is my data. And all the data comes together into a National Spatial Data Observatory. It's a 5-year program, and we'll build this observatory for all of government, where we can then run the various analytics, be it security, be it food security, be it human settlements, and it's all of our government program. But it is, I think that's the only way that you break down the silos in your government, is if you can elevate it to a point where the data becomes freely available so that we can all use it openly. I think there's one more slide. Next slide. I wouldn't be doing my work properly if I didn't speak about land policy as being one of the most important climate instruments in our hands. Where and how we allocate land, whose rights we secure, which countries gain predictable tenure, will decide how our societies cope with droughts, floods, and food system disruptions. We need to start to place women and young people at the center of this policy, because without secure land rights, they cannot invest in soil health, water harvesting, or diversified livelihoods. Across SADC, we need to recognize that climate change, land governance, and social justice have become a single agenda. The decisions made here will determine whether women and youth in our villages, our townships, our borderlands have the security and support they need to adapt, or whether they remain exposed to repeated climate shocks without stable foundations. So that would be my call, is to ask that we start looking at these land rights as a core part of the work that we do. And thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Herman. I'd like to establish if the city of eThekwini, Dr. Rob is here, so that he can ascend to the stage to provide the city perspective on climate change and risk management experiences. They will make reference to the recent flood that they have experienced and handled as a city, and then it will be a moment for reflection for all the 4 inputs. Please, Dr. Rob, come forward. Is there a presentation to show up? Please fly the presentation.
greetings to each and every one of you today, this morning, and I declare that all protocols are observed. My name is Roshni Bob, and I'm the Project Executive for the Community Services and Public Safety Departments within eThekwini Municipality, and the Disaster Management Directorate reports through to us. I think the first thing we need to present is the presentation and thereafter the video, please. Apologies from Mr. Vincent Ngubane, who is the Director of Disaster Management. He is ill, he's taken ill, and we wish him a speedy recovery. From a disaster management perspective, the next slide, please. We'd like to say at a local government context, we equally have legal prescripts that govern us, from the South African Climate Change Act right down to various acts, including our Intergovernmental Relations Framework. We've just had our previous presenter present on an all-of-government approach on some methodologies, and to say that from a local government context, we appreciate that. Next slide, please. Next slide. I'd like to say that eThekwini Municipality is not shy from major disasters linked to climate change. We've been seeing it and we've been experiencing it for years, but major ones lately and more frequently since 2017 to date. Apart from the floods 2022, we equally had an unprecedented tornado that hit us in this year that impacted quite a bit of residential suburbs in the northern part of eThekwini Municipality. So severe floods is compounding and it's impacting us on a daily basis. In that regard, we will try to prepare in the space, and also grateful to our partners such as the Corporate Social Program from National Treasury, the World Bank, other UN agencies where we have lessons learned. For the 2017 and 2019 flood, we commenced with lessons learned. It was dropped a little due to COVID, and then we had the 2022 floods, and that actually took us further into the space. Next slide, please. I'm sorry, I'll put my hand up, and that would mean next slide. Thank you. So in that space, we've had various lessons learned. We've had other partners. We've had even people from other parts of the world come into the space to talk about experiences and to actually test the elements of resilience within the eThekwini Municipality. The result of that is that from that space, we had 4 emerging thematic areas, which is information, management, and early warning systems, the importance of technology. Also included in that is the incident command systems to enhance the provision of emergency shelters and temporary accommodation. The more events you have, the more the requirement and need for temporary accommodation, and then also to ensure that you have sufficient funding and support, including types of relief programs in that space. Our disaster management level 2 plan was culminated into the output from your lessons learned, and we're happy to say that it is adopted by council, and now the implementation process starts. In the level 2 plan, there are concentrated areas such as doing disaster risk assessments, concentrating on disaster reduction strategies, to make sure that we have efficient and effective responses, and to also look at coordination and collaboration in an effective way, because it is an all-of-government approach, it's multidisciplinary, but it also introduces community and civil society in the space. It has to be done in an organized way, and then thereafter, monitoring evaluation of what we do and the respective implementations of that. So that's well, I've just given you part of that, but it's got 16 areas. The level 2 plan got 16 areas of concentration. In that, also included in the city is the Municipal Forum for Climate Change. And in that space, we have in that space, we have an enabling environment. My hand is up. Somebody can please. Yes, thank you. We have 4 thematic areas in that space: the enabling environment for policy, legislative and planning change, governance, research, communications and capacity building, and most important, climate change finance. Then we also look at cross-cutting methodologies. We're not alone. Okay, disaster management does not operate in an island. We have to make sure we have a helicopter and holistic view of what's transpiring out there, to look at the economic development, to look at risk management and other forms. Then also to look at your energy, transport and waste crisis. When a disaster occurs, sometimes roads are blocked. People cannot get to work. There's many things. And also what we have to be mindful of is the increase of social ills in spaces when disasters occur. And thereafter we check for adaptation. We have to look at biodiversity, food security, the health. Look at also the sea level rising and the impact of the coastal impact, because eThekwini municipality is a coastal city, and also the implications of our water and sanitation space. So when it comes to disaster management preparedness, overall we have what we call a joint operating center. Once information is obtained, we have to activate the disaster management center and initially conduct, and then thereafter we have to conduct need assessments on what the impact is on the ground, and then we start looking at where do we get our relief, where do we sit displaced people. Majority of the times we're looking at our community halls and our sports grounds, and that is not conducive. We're required to start evolving and looking at more better placed temporary shelters, considering the frequency of our events in that space. We also have relief interventions from both government and other civil society organizations that come into play, including spiritual and religious organizations. And the relief interventions, majority of the time, is coordinated by the elected component, which is the ward councillor in that space. And thereafter, communication and alerts around methodologies occur with regards to where, what, when, and how things are going to be happening in the future. We also, in the space, have a disaster management advisory forum, and in the advisory forum, it's multidisciplinary. We have our business partners, our academia, our officials, and everybody else in that space. So I just want to advise you that everything that we do, we try to bring the community. So we actually make sure that we do ward-based community assessments so that we can explore and look at our early warning systems and whether it's effective. And I'll discuss early warning systems very quickly on the slides. We're also looking at our major hazard industries. As you know, we've got oil, we've got petrol, we've got other industries in our space that is hugely dependent, and not to mention the next speaker from Toyota, South Africa, assembly plants as well in our space. We've also linked to that, we embrace the types of social relief that comes both from government as well as civil society. We're introducing a municipal adaptation planning process, and we also looking at post-rehabilitation and reconstruction in that. So very quickly, the South African Weather Services will give you a warning. and we will decide how we will look at it based on what category, whether it's an orange, level 6, or however the intensity of the warning is, and that would determine how we will start planning ourselves from the Joint Operations Center to rope in all the departments that requires to be roped in managing disaster relief. We thereafter start activating and actioning our early warning systems through various methodologies. We utilize technology such as our WhatsApp groups, our city Facebook page. We also use radio communication, loud hailing, SMS to all the councillors, and then also encourage people to utilize, if they experience any adversity, to actually utilize our emergency services number, which is 031-361-0000. We are now in the process of trying to actually get a 3-digit emergency services number. We're getting people to engage in that space to look at how we actually get a more crisp 911 equivalent in our space, but again, looking at how we embrace it in an all-of-government approach. Linked to that, we also, can I ask for the slide after this, please? Linked to that, eThekwini municipality has its own forecast early warning system, which we call FUSE. All right? So when the South African Weather Services give out an alert, but this early warning system is operational 24/7 every single day, it doesn't prop up. What it does is it matches and overlays what the South African Weather Services is saying. And thereafter, it makes it easier for us to target our communication in the space where we actually look at constantly through the global forecast system, through the South African Weather Services system, and also through our respective real-time radar systems. We can identify where cells are moving and actually utilize that data to get more crisp information in the space. And then thereafter, it can make your warning system, your early warning systems to neighborhoods more focused. eThekwini municipality is quite vast, so we can actually get loud hailing and to the impacted and most vulnerable very, very quickly. To that extent, the data also creates historical information, so we can actually, we also a flood model. We're doing our flood modeling system, so that it actually makes us in advance and proactively go and do training and disaster risk management in communities around certain places. The other matter is about the community early warning systems. I just wanted to share a quick story with you around the 2022 floods. This is the Palmet River and Quarry Road settlement. In that space, we have over 1,000 households, and it was impacted. It was washed away, but the amazing thing is through the early warning systems and the training provided by the university and the FUSE colleagues in eThekwini municipality, we had 0 loss of life in the April floods 2022 in that space. For us, our priority projects is really to implement the disaster management risk and response level 2 plan that helps us become more effective and more resilient. It's also to include technology and assist in incident management and assessment in times of major incidents. It is also to continue to encourage and embrace stakeholders, our partners, through the Disaster Management Advisory Forum, so that we leave no one behind, but also understand that everybody embraces the concept of this is my city, my safety, and my responsibility in this space. Obtaining funding for approval of some of our critical posts is negotiated from time to time, and it's a continuous process. We are developing and we have off-site plans for our major hazard industries so that when things happen, we know the targeted approach and to prevent the vulnerability that those industries pose to our citizens. Our early warning systems have been, we have identified our high-risk areas and continue training and educating people within the area and linked to how to embrace the early warning systems, to continue having public awareness and to improve the relief programs in our space, particularly from a city perspective, to find the space for relief storage. Our achievements is we are one of the cities that is part of the Making Cities Resilient by 2030 initial scorecard. We've had our first assessment and we're happy to say we scored 92 out of 141. It may seem insignificant, but really this is the only city in Africa that has scored. It's the highest scored city in the continent, the University of St. Equally so as our partners in C40 reporting, we also want to say that we have we've improved our score from D through to B, and from an adaptation section we've scored an A. So that is actually quite good for a city, a coastal city, and considering the amount of climate change impact that we've had from 2017 through to date. I'd like to ask if we can play the video now. Thank you.
Hunslet Road Bridge over the Pisang River. The Hunslet Road Bridge replaces 3 separate, deteriorated cellular bridges previously located within a roadway-filled embankment crossing the Pisang River floodplain. During the catastrophic April 2022 floods, the embankment was overtopped, causing all 3 existing bridges to collapse. The new Hunslet Road Bridge features a full instrumentation system to gather critical data, making it the first long, fully integral bridge constructed in a coastal climate in South Africa. The structure comprises 4 spans with a total length of 90 meters, complemented by a new road alignment with vertical curves extending approximately 200 meters on each side, carefully integrated with the existing road network. Extensive gabion works were implemented to protect adjacent embankments and guide water flow effectively. This project successfully addressed the immediate transportation needs of the community while delivering durable, sustainable, and cost-effective infrastructure.
Stop the video. Okay, colleagues, I just want to say that eThekwini municipality has embraced the concept of building back better. And if amongst the videos in your site, you will clearly see today, when you go through to the site visits, the fact that we are committed to building back better, be it our community residential areas or even our social infrastructure or the important road networks where the bridges and everything are. You clearly see the improvements that has come through and the elements of technology and knowledge that has been shared by partners from all over the world for us to improve. I want to thank you for the opportunity to allow me to share my story. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Rowe, for visualizing the impact of the disasters in our city. Distinguished delegates, Your Excellencies, you have absorbed 4 presentations, so we do appreciate that a body break may be important and necessary. So we will respectfully request that for about 5 minutes that we take that body break and immediately return to the plenary for the interactions on those 4 presentations, the questions and answers. There is a request from the Minister as one of the panelists that she may have to leave for other commitments. So we would like to compact even that part, but we do observe that we have been sitting for very long for 4 presentations. So the time now is 11:47, and we wanted to check if you would like us to take the Q&A when we break properly, or we take the 5 minutes break. What would be the suggestion? So we engage. Okay. Thank you very much. I would like to hand over to the acting president of SADC, Honorable Isaacs, to preside over the Q&A for the 4 presenters. And I would like to request the last presenter, Dr. Rob, to come forward so that you could form the full panel for the engagement. Clarities, question, or any comments? We have put a segment of about 20 to 25 minutes for that engagement that our panelists will respond.
Thank you very much. And let's just indicate with your country where yes, Malawi, Namibia, Eswatini, who else? Mozambique. Let me just finish the site. So it is Mozambique, Malawi, Namibia, Eswatini, who else? South Africa, villages, Moran, Zambia, does it make the total? Let's start with Mozambique.
Obrigada, Excelências. Excelências, senhores presidentes dos parlamentos da SADC, distinguidos convidados, senhoras e meus senhores. Bom, é para nós uma elevada honra participar neste debate. Tema ou assunto premente para os nossos países. O impacto das mudanças climáticas é assunto que preocupa os nossos países.
Queremos saudar a presidência do Fórum Parlamentar pela escolha deste importante tema, cujo debate naturalmente vai, sem dúvidas, contribuir para reforçar a resposta coletiva dos nossos parlamentos da SADC aos efeitos das mudanças climáticas. Queremos interessar uma saudação especial ao povo e ao Parlamento da África do Sul pela calorosa hospitalidade que sempre nos habitou, sempre que visitamos este país irmão. Queremos estender as nossas felicitações aos panelistas pelas suas valiosas e importantes contribuições para este debate, que vão nos ajudar naturalmente nos debates que vamos ter nos nossos parlamentos e na solução desta grande preocupação de todos nós. A nossa região da SADC é uma das mais afetadas pelos efeitos das mudanças climáticas, com particular ênfase secas, depressões tropicais, ciclones e inundações. São fenômenos de natureza ambiental que rapidamente transformam-se em desafios econômicos, sociais e humanitários, afetando de uma forma severa os grupos mais vulneráveis, dentre eles mulheres, jovens e crianças, como foi bem dito aqui durante as várias apresentações. E no caso das mulheres, estes eventos climáticos extremos agravam as desigualdades preexistentes, dificultando ainda mais o acesso aos recursos e aumentando a sua exposição a riscos como violência baseada no gênero e no tráfico. Não são poucos exemplos nos nossos países de mulheres que foram violentadas ao percorrer longas distâncias à procura de água, ou de crianças que foram raptadas durante deslocamentos forçados. Para a juventude, também constitui a maioria da população dos nossos países. Estas mudanças climáticas agravam o desemprego, limitando a sua capacidade de autossustento. É também preocupante o impacto dos elementos climáticos extremos na proliferação de conflitos nos nossos países. A competição pelo acesso e controle dos recursos cada vez mais escassos aumenta o risco de inclusão e prolongamento de conflitos que desestabilizam os nossos países e comprometem naturalmente o futuro da nossa juventude. Excelências, a nossa experiência de gestão dos efeitos de mudanças climáticas em Moçambique ensina-nos que os parlamentos desempenham um papel importante neste processo. É nosso dever legislar com justiça, fiscalizar com rigor e assegurar que os orçamentos nacionais reflitam prioridades climáticas com enfoque na igualdade do gênero e inclusão social. Nesta perspectiva, com vista ao reforço da atuação coletiva, propomos a harmonização de legislação climática no seio da SADC para a gestão transfronteiriça de riscos climáticos, a integração de abordagens de gênero e juventude nos planos de adoção e nas contribuições nacionalmente determinadas, a criação de mecanismos de facilitação de acesso a financiamento para ações de adaptação, mitigação e empreendedorismo, e o reforço da cooperação regional no seio da SADC, especialmente na partilha de informação e intervenção pós-desastres, tirando maior proveito do Centro Operativo Regional de Emergência da SADC. Excelências, as mudanças climáticas não são apenas um fenômeno ambiental, são uma questão de desenvolvimento, de justiça social e dignidade humana. Proteger as mulheres, jovens e crianças é, acima de tudo, proteger o futuro da nossa região. A Assembleia da República de Moçambique reafirma o seu compromisso em continuar a cooperar com todos os parlamentos da SADC na promoção de políticas climáticas mais justas e inclusivas para uma resposta regional cada vez mais coordenada e robusta. Termino felicitando mais uma vez os apresentadores dos temas que vão ao encontro daquilo que são as preocupações dos nossos parlamentos e povos. Obrigada.
Members, I just want to remind you that we don't have 10 minutes each, not today. The most that we will allow is 5 minutes, but it's a 3 minutes rule because it's questions of clarity and engagement. Malawi, you will be the second.
Good morning, Right Honorable Speaker and everybody. Thank you so much for giving me a chance to ask a question. I think my question goes to the Honorable Minister of Human Settlement, and perhaps he might also be assisted by Mr. Kekana, if possible. It's to do with policy and practice disconnect. I want to draw you to experience in Malawi where we come up with a policy of settlement which actually encourages departments to move people from flood-prone areas to safe areas. And then you have the individuals saying, no, we can't move from this place to a certain place because this is the home of our ancestors. Our mothers, fathers died here, and we have a grave here. We can't be moved out. And you have the human rights organizations coming in, trying to protect them as well. I just wanted to learn from South Africa whether you experience the same. But otherwise, Right Honorable Speaker, very grateful. I think the presentations were very related and very informative. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Namibia. Ola, is it you?
Thank you so much for the opportunity. Salutation from Namibia to honorable members. I would like to perhaps just pose a question to Mr. Hammond on particularly drone operations there. Perhaps we can get a bit more technical on that. Data collection is indeed a key element to future prevention of such incidences, especially particular relation to climate change. I would like to know what your challenges are to your drone programs with regards to the flying in restricted areas, prohibited areas, and endangered areas, and of course, what challenges do you face with regards to the registries of your drones and the pilots also, particularly the training that they go through? It is an important thing that we need to learn from with regards to the privacy of the individuals as per regulation of your SACAA and the safety also in the airspace with regards to these drones. Number two, also shortly, just I would also want to know the interference of your drones when flying close to the water bodies. How do you curb that, or does that happen with your new particular drones, or is the technology maybe that you're using that is now updated compared to the old ones that we might have experience in? And perhaps South Africa is one of the countries that is now at the leading edge and to drone database. I believe that is something we can also all learn from as a SADC member states. And of course, just for data collection's sake, just to perhaps one of the three things to advise us on how to go about that. Thank you so much.
Thank you. My first question was going to T.S. Similar. Maybe let me start saying by you mentioned that climate crisis also drives a loss of biodiversity and disruption of the ecosystem. Perhaps animals move out of their natural habitats as well. And maybe adding to that, the climate crisis present added injustice. Those who contribute least to the crisis face the worst consequences with limited resources needed to be climate adaptive. Then my question would be, firstly, what mitigating measures are we taking to make sure that those that are liable for these causes are paying for that? As I've mentioned, well, Minister, honestly, if I would be direct, I'll say, if you go and sleep and wake up in the morning and find yourself dead, how would you feel? The reason I'm asking this question is because the climate or the effects of climate changes are so sudden. You go to sleep, tomorrow you find everything gone. So that's why I'm asking, what mitigating measures that we are taking to make sure those that are liable are paying for this? Thank you.
Thank you, Eswatini, South Africa.
Thank you, VP, and good morning, colleagues. My two quick questions. The first one will be to the Minister, and I think the second one can be to any of the panelists. Minister, the South African phenomenon of land invasion, for example, particularly in floodplain areas where we know that if the disaster strikes, those people will be wiped out. Don't you perhaps think it's time really that we look at the Prevention of Illegal Eviction Act so that we can really start protecting people from themselves, if I can put it that way? Because the reality is that, legalizing invasion in a dangerous area has severe consequences for the very same people that have invaded the land. So that's the first question. I mean, don't you think it's high time that really we look at the PI Act and make changes that will protect people from such devastation? And the last question, as I said, it can be, responded to by anyone. In South Africa, there's a pattern of disasters we have seen over the couple of years. I think we have a pretty good idea where the disaster, whether it's fire disaster, whether it's a natural disaster due to lack of proper infrastructure and lack of maintenance of that infrastructure. Now, surely as one of the countries now who are on the list of high risk disaster areas, is there data that is telling us where these areas are, what is the situation in those areas, and really what do we need to prevent what is inevitable should the disaster strike? Because we know what is going to happen to those areas, as we have seen in Entebbe. So have we started really to collect data and say, how do we proactively deal with that situation so that we don't react to crisis all the time? Thank you.
Thank you, Zambia.
Thank you, Madam Vice President. My question is very simple for Mr. Kekana. And I wish to thank you, Mr. Kekana, for the detailed insights you have shared with us this morning. May I just ask how South Africa identifies and maps areas most at risk from climate change related disasters, and whether this information is shared regionally to improve planning across SADC. Thank you.
Thanks, Xavier. Angola, you are sure you don't want to contribute now? Thank you. So with it said and done, we will now request the Minister first, and then, or should we request others first? Let the Minister first respond, and then we will follow the others.
Thank you very much, Acting President. Well, the policy and practice disconnect from the question of my colleague from Malawi is the same. We experience the same. Not very far from where we are, one of the last toll plazas coming to eThekwini on the N3 is Marian Hill Toll Plaza, those who are familiar. If you look on your right hand side, there are houses on the slope. I don't come from here, you know, but how do I know? It's because they've been reported. It's because we have taken strides to engage people who are on the slope to say, one day we're going to wake up dead, like something says. And the critical question is, maybe I must go and ask them, is how are you going to feel? But we get all these responses, and they make relocation and resettlement very, very difficult. Such that even if you intend to prevent particularly fatalities and a loss of life, your measures sometimes are found wanting. In some instances, you relocate people, knowing very well that this is a flood line. As you relocate these people, others are going to come and settle at the very same space tomorrow. But I also think from our policy perspective is that how reactive and our municipalities can learn to manage those spaces and prevent people settling. But the element which also comes is because our people have no patience because of the shrinking fiscus, the slowness in the allocation and the formalization of settlements. So they know, because these ones are compelled by law and regulation on disaster. Let's go and put ourselves in the area where they know we may die and they'll be swift in responding to us. And that is why when you relocate people, I'll use another example here. The floods that happened in Lamontville, going down Umlazi River, and we took the families that were affected into Ward 5 of the city of eThekwini. And I was present myself. And the people of Ward 5 said, no, 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 no. Please don't. We don't want them. These houses are for us first, before. So the land is good and is secured, put them in the shed first. Let them be where we are, because we've also been waiting for houses. So there's quite a lot of difficulties that you find when you are trying to relocate people, even beyond. And then you also have the segment of the rich who don't want the poor next to government land. You might have heard here there were gunfires between our land in the municipality and the residents of Palito, and we're relocating flood victims. Some who have waited since 2020. And the Palino people were saying, hey, go take your type of people not very close to me. It's a very good and well apportioned land here. Find them somewhere else, Minister. We've tried to find a solution. I think we're starting to build and relocate them to that space. I'm just saying, my colleague, it is beyond even them accepting the challenges and the steps that we find. Of course, the other element which our policy can't align really. But I have a 6-bedroom house which is washed away, and my policy provides a 40 square meter. 2 bedrooms, very small, 1 bathroom and a kitchen, and a small sitting room. And the person is supposed to relocate in Kuzo, where it used to be a mining area, and the land is problematic, and in Centurion, and that the land is caving in, and government has done the assessment and says, hey, here you are. He says, you see my house, Minister, move me to a same thing, like the one that I have, or you leave me alone. And now the problem is I can't move out of the, it will actually not be affordable even for the country to work on site. So we navigate, we win some, we lose some. The pace is slower in other areas, but the policy is adhered to. I don't want to talk about human rights organizations. They don't like me, and I know. I know why. So the less I say, the better it is for myself. I'm going to pair the second question and the question from South Africa on illegal eviction. You may be aware that we are almost going towards public participation. We're aligned into cabinet into the prevention of illegal eviction, and it's taking twofold. It carries the element which you are talking about dealing with fair, logical, for safety, relocation of people, but it also prevents unscrupulous landowners who just, without following processes and procedures, evict people on the basis of either unaffordability, which has not been tested, of a wide range of areas where people will just find themselves landless and homeless. Even a transfer of land from owner A to owner B, without really taking care of what was the state of owner A and what are we jointly going to do as land is transferring. Fairly so, I'm buying, but you need to, you as a resident in that particular farm or in that particular area, you need by law to define a process on how are you going to be dealing with people who are inhabited of that area and for how long they've been staying there. It's quite a very detailed act which tries to look and avoid and minimize the scale in which our people. I mean, if you look into what is happening in Green and Mpumalanga, it's very sad. Over 200 plus families displaced just by the movement of land between A and B as the owners of the mine that is in that space. So, all what I know also is that you can't regulate people by a piece of paper. On top of the act, there has to be massive education for people to understand the importance of that. The President signed the Housing Consumer Bill, for example, into an act, I think, at the February or so this year. That is supposed to protect you against a developer or any other person you have hired, and it goes into a fine of about 2 million. But how many people, even if our inspectors drive past the street and they realize you're building for yourself in Soweto, for example, and by the look of the eye, they realize that no, this thing is not conforming to building standards. And they disembark, they talk to you, owner, but your builder, Minister Simelane, is not following this and that. Have you registered here? No. Why don't you register? And the owner says, no, I'm not interested in registering it. I know he is going to build my house and fairly soon. And 3 years down the line, that house is collapsed. Who must come into intervention? Now the amendment allows us now to find directly Minister Simelane who's building, with or without the authority of the person he's building for. Because self-love also sometimes really goes with understanding. When you are cornered and convinced that this person has built for so and so and so and so, you may actually assume that no, this government just doesn't want to help me. This is my money, I'll see a fit, how do I use it? But when the building collapses and it kills people, whether it's a wall or it's a house or whatever, it's a fatality we all don't want to deal with. And it is better if we avoid it. My brother from the Eswatini, I wish I can have the answer. But for me, I also think early warning systems, if they are really adhered to, they can go a long way. Yes, a disaster like fire, it could be a primer stove or a paraffin stove that bursts now, and there's no warning, right? Other than that, quite a lot of the work that they do, weather services, and I'm talking only in the South African context, and I know each and every country will have such. You do get an early warning. And the early warning will tell you, relocate them, as my colleague from Malawi has said, and you will have challenges. The early warning will go to an extent that we're expecting heavy rains next week at that particular area. And in some instances, they are able even to exact the number of millimeters that will be pouring at that level. I go to Nkomazi myself and I tell them there are floods coming in 9 days' time. They say this river has never been filled since 1982. Where are they today? They are flooded and wiped off. And myself and the MEC, there in Mpumalanga are helping. Because you now can't ask them to say, but what did I say last week? You now have to come as a government and exercise the spirit of Ubuntu and assist people who are in need. And they are the first ones in front of the cameras to say, hey, this government doesn't love us. We are so unfortunate in this country. And when you respond and say, but here is a notice delivered in your house. No, they just left it here. They didn't explain, you are never right. But nobody wants to listen into the early response. But in other instances, I think as government must also take responsibility. And for me, Umtata will be a great example, said as it is. Early warning giving, early warning right as it was predicted, but we lost 10 children amongst the 100 plus people who died. And I think that is as a neglect of us, government. It rains early hours of the morning, but there's still a school bus which gets to be swept around 8 in the morning, driving children to school. They don't come across any municipal police or police to say the road is closed. So what is the early warning for? It's not about sit at home. It's about them to sit at home for us to go out and make sure that the streets are cleared and there's no one who is moving there. And I think we failed those children, you know. So it depends on the circumstances. But if we are alert, I think we can really minimize disaster. Thank you very much.
Thank you for the question. I'm going to quickly talk to the drone matters. Firstly, you're correct, we followed the national legislation, regulations on flying. So every pilot is certified, every aircraft, every flight is certified by the civil aviation. We do log our flight plans, even in these prohibited and areas, You can get flexible use of airspace, you just need to get the right approvals and be timeous in those approvals. I think one of the key things in starting up a drone business, in South Africa at least, is that you have to take your time. It's not something you can decide today. I saw drones, I'm going to go buy 10 of them, and I'm going to have people fly them. Many of those drones end up in boardrooms or in safes or in cupboards. What you need to do is you need to plan that process very well. And the first set of drones that you buy, when you start your operating certificate with civil aviation, is also to go at the same time and get a service provider under which you can fly. And that person will teach you all about airspace and logging flight plans, etc., while your pilots get trained, etc. So there's a two-pronged approach to this. If you do the one or the other, you're likely doomed in terms of that, the way things work. On privacy, each of our flights, we comply with civil aviation regulations. So in terms of that, we go to the landowners, we get landowner permission, we go to communities, we explain that the drones are flying over. After disasters, it's not that big a problem because people expect support and the movement in the air. I think that the one thing that one has to also remember is that a lot of when you saw the imagery that I showed you, the software automatically takes the people out and the cars, so you can't really see it. And that's one of the only ways you can see it's a digital twin, is that there's no people on the streets. The software removes all of that automatically. The interference near water bodies, the newer platforms, they don't have that problem. It's a magnetic problem that they had on the earlier drones, and the new ones are fine. In fact, our drones, we'll be looking at doing coastal high water level marks at the moment, and because they can go about 170 kilometers one way, it's about trying to move with the drone as the drone is moving on the road. So we call it DV loss. So while you drive, you have the drone in sight and the drone does its work. So these are the kind of things that the other thing that we did is everybody goes through training and also security training. So we have some of our secretaries in the offices, they control the safes and the keys to those safes, so that we ensure that we just comply. For us, it took us 3 years to get an operating certificate from civil aviation, which we got on the 1st of September. But before that, we flew under a service provider's, and only a few pilots. We had 20 slots under that. But yeah, that's basically a quick summary, but you're always welcome to take my number, and that's how we can support you.
Thank you. Just to answer 2 questions. I think the first one was around database. So in South Africa, the Disaster Management Act mandates what we call the National Disaster Management Center to act as a data repository. So the NDFC keeps an online portal, so you can easily access the data, as the speaker was asking. And then on the other question from this one, about climate justice, as of this year, 23rd of July, the International Court of Justice actually issued an advisory opinion that says exactly what you were asking, that you can actually sue under this advisory opinion, but it's yet to be tested. Of course, we always advocate that the best course is international cooperation, because it might actually be difficult to issue legal action from one state to another. But there is that ICJ advisory opinion, and it is just that, an opinion. but these things do carry weight around issues of climate justice. So it's something to be mindful. Yeah, so let me just open those two questions.
Okay, thank you. I will look at the biodiversity as well as the patterns of disaster from a local context, as a local government practitioner. I just want to say that because of population growth, we're getting more and more vulnerable. We're building and utilizing our natural resources to build. In other words, eThekwini municipality was known to be the sugarcane city. And we've now decided to build in that spaces, but not appreciating as disasters occur. More frequently, we're experiencing sinkhole syndromes, where sinkholes are falling in the center of people's homes. And that's purely because we don't test our soil, we're not compacting agricultural soil sufficiently to build human settlements in that space. Patterns of disaster and data knowledge management is extremely important. How we utilize it going forward that shows the elements of whether we're resilient in the space. However, we must appreciate climate change and Mother Nature, because more and more we're getting incidents that's coming through that surprises us. We've never experienced it in the coastal areas, we've never experienced it in this country. Hello, it's occurring. So how do we prepare appropriately and look at our peers and actually start planning accordingly? Never say that this is not going to happen to me, because what's happening in Florida is definitely not going to touch us. No, as coastal cities, globally, we need to start learning from one another, looking at data, and actualize scenario planning in our spaces so that we can be ready and be disaster resilient should an impact occur in our space. Thank you very much.
Yes, Speaker.
Thank you very much, Vice President and Acting President of SADC, and thank you to the panel for the presentation. Just one, maybe two questions, but brief. What importance does historical data have in our planning, particularly in the context of climate change? I'm raising this because if you look at here in eThekwini, Umlazi River used to go through a particular route and was diverted at some stage when work was done. And when the flood came, the river remembered where it used to go. Secondly, if you go back again to a eThekwini situation, historical information indicates that 100 years flood line used to go in this particular area, where later on there was building. So I'm raising this issue because what we've experienced with the eThekwini and maybe other areas must say to us, before we make allocations and planning of new townships and areas, we need to factor in what might have been 30 years, 100 years data on this land so that we plan correctly. But also the issue Ms. Mulia raising with regards to the land use and what you are saying in Tonat land, where they started moving away from sugar to human settlement. Are there areas of communication across local spheres and sectoral departments to understand the change on the land use, so that when we sign the redesignation of land from agriculture to other spaces, we are conscious to look at what are the likely pitfalls if, for instance, you are going to build a particular infrastructure. And maybe for the Minister of Housing,
In terms of building plans, is this new challenge enabling us to relook at our building plans, but also types of infrastructure, so that it takes into consideration the realities of climate change? I always say one thing that is funny unless it's flood, but when there are certain collapsed structures in the United States where they build with timber, there are very few fatalities, because part of the bulk is where they build underground, which is more your solid structure. And the bulk in terms of how much cement and brick you use to contend with the environment, you know, there's a particular regulation. But then up structure, then you build with materials that when disaster strike, you would have minimal, you know, fatalities. Is that something that we're looking at in our building regulations, so that indeed we start to ensure that in the manner in which we build going forward, we take into consideration, like in Japan, their buildings actually sway because they've got tectonic plates that move every day. So it's not like a once-off, you know, incident. So you would hear sometimes when you're building, it's like you're tilting, but that's how they've built it. And you're not going to fall, you will just but the structures are not going to collapse. I'm just saying that as we think about the future where climate change is our reality, what is the say in terms of our building regulations? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Speaker Chiefly.
Thank you, Vice President Isaac. Just one question from my side, directed to the two wife. The issue where we are as a country in terms of the SADC protocol on environmental management for sustainable development. I was trying to find out from the chair as to whether, because I don't remember either this seventh administration or the sixth administration as Parliament dealing with this protocol. Because it's quite important to know whether it's one of the areas that we need to prioritize, because it talks to the climate change strategy and also the climate change strategy and action plan. So therefore, as we appreciate the various inputs that we made from the top table, I think it becomes important just to get a sense as to whether as a department, because the department will be the sponsor to Parliament, whether there is a sense of where we are in terms of this protocol. Thank you, Honorable Acting President.
Thank you very much. I think we will give to the Minister again, and then those that think that they will be able to contribute can then follow.
Okay, thank you. Once more, I think let me start with the historical data in relation to climate change. A great partnership that was presented is between our agency, HDA, for planning purposes. I mean, including the mapping and the assessment of our informal settlements. We may be scared to go. Now we know we've got 4,075 informal settlements with the Gauteng hitting around 800 something. Of course, as we're sitting here, someone is building a shack somewhere. So it's a moving target. But for the fact that we know there are 4,075 is as a result of the change of the historical pattern, but also coming on where informal settlements have been, and what do we do with the data to play? And that will also help us, how do we assist the municipalities which lands are likely to be targeted to be informal settlement, so that they can also make sure that they protect what is within their pocket. If you would want a good response on changes on terms of the floodlines, I think Toyota could be the best ones to respond in the eThekwini example and how the challenge that they faced subsequently that affected their fate. The fact of the matter is, as we accelerate and improve